The Federal Election Commission was set up in the aftermath of the Watergate scandal in order to follow the money, to make sure that the American people know who is supporting various candidates, who they might owe some obligation to as a result, and what they're spending their money on. And I think that one thing that the agency has been roundly praised for is how well we collect that information and get it up on the web and make it available to the American people.
So you see the primary job of the FEC as you are the clearinghouse for data about how money is being used in politics.
Transparency about money in politics is our core mission.
And then how much of your mission is investigating?
There are laws and rules that govern what kind of money candidates and party committees and other political committees are allowed to accept and how much. We are the enforcement body for that, the civil enforcement body, and anyone can file a complaint. If they think someone's violating the law, our lawyers will look into it. They will prepare a memorandum for the commission as to whether an investigation is warranted or a penalty is warranted or it's just something that ought to be dismissed outright, and the commission will decide.
And with the resignation of Vice Chair Peterson, the FEC will no longer have a quorum and no longer be able to vote on what enforcement action to take, if any, at the conclusion of an investigation. That's correct?
That is correct. So any investigations that were previously authorized will go on. Our lawyers will continue to try and find out those key facts for us and write them up and tee it up for decision for when we next have a quorum, which hopefully will be very soon. So the work will go on investigations that were already ongoing. However,
do you have some that are ongoing?
Oh, yes.
That were approved by enough people?
Yes,
okay.
Absolutely. We do. We have lots of them, actually. There are hundreds of complaints, hundreds of enforcement matters that are in some stage of the enforcement process. For any new complaints that come in the door, our lawyers will tee them up for decision, but we won't be able to launch any new investigations until we get a quorum back.
So the FEC has no plans to refer those complaints that lawyers have vetted to another investigatory agency. They'll stay with the FEC until you have a quorum?
Well, there really are not a lot of options for other agencies. We are the sole civil enforcement body for campaign finance violations at the federal level. If it is a knowing and willful violation, the Justice Department could get involved. There could be criminal liability. But that is not the typical situation, frankly.
Now that the vice chair has stepped down and there won't be a quorum, how does your day-to-day change?
Well, in some ways, my job hasn't changed that much because I am assuming that we're going to have a quorum back soon. So I am.
Wait, but why are you assuming that? There's one nomination that's been pending since 2017. There's been no movement on it. So do you know something that I don't know about why you think there will be a quorum soon?
No, I have confidence that the powers that be who are charged with this responsibility are not going to allow the agency to go on indefinitely in a period without commissioners. But I do think there will be some pressure brought to bear in order to bring the agency back to a functional quorum. And hopefully, we'll have 6 commissioners. That would be nice to have 6 again.
Well, and you say functional quorum, but a lot hasn't gotten done because it has been deadlocked along party lines. So is this actually functionally all that different than when Mr. Peterson was still a member of the FEC?
Well, actually it is. And you asked how my day is different. One of the things that I was doing as chair was trying very hard to reduce the backlog of cases that were then and continue to be, some of them, sitting around waiting for commission decision. There has been a tendency in the past for commissioners to sit too long on those decisions. And I was trying to move the ball forward. We were making some good progress. I was getting cooperation from my colleagues. What would be most helpful is if we get commissioners who are dedicated to the mission of the agency and are willing to enforce the law. That has been a problem in the past. It's not a matter of partisan bickering over who should be fined. It's the problems that the commission has had in the past in enforcing the law have stemmed from the fact that some commissioners don't really like the law to begin with and have a great deal of skepticism about government regulation in general, but campaign finance regulation in particular.
Are you in coded language talking about Mr. Peterson?
Well, I think that it's not a secret that, and I like Matt Peterson. I like him a lot. He's a very nice guy, and I enjoyed working with him. But it's not a secret that Republicans are more skeptical about campaign finance regulation than Democrats are. And if you had one of the Republican commissioners here, they would tell you that their concerns are about the First Amendment and that this is an infringement on people's First Amendment rights when they have to comply with campaign finance regulations that limit their ability to get their message out. But I think a lot of other folks in the country believe that money is not speech, and limits on the amount of money and who the money can come from are appropriate in order to prevent conflicts of interest.
Over the last 10 years, the world that we live in has changed a lot. And, there's been a lot of criticism that the FEC hasn't adequately responded to some of those changes or made new rules that kept up with the times. So can you talk a little bit about what maybe you would have liked to have seen happen over the last few years, or at least in your time at the FEC?
I completely agree with that criticism of the FEC. We have not adopted new rules to address super PACs since their existence. They came into existence after the Citizens United decision and its judicial progeny in 2010, and we have not, since 2010, adopted any rules at all governing super PACs. That's kind of crazy because they have assumed a huge role. We last addressed the internet in a rulemaking in 2006, 2007. And
very different internet.
Yes, it is a very different environment. Back then, when we did our last rulemaking, YouTube was in its infancy, and the notion of something going viral at no cost without somebody having to pay to place information on some medium that people would see, that notion just didn't even exist back then. So I think that there are lots of areas. I completely agree with those who think that we have not done as much as we could have. I have suggested any number of proposals to my colleagues, and they have not been adopted. Dealing with foreign money. This has become a huge issue, trying to prevent foreign influence in our elections. This is something I was concerned about even before 2016 and all the revelations about what happened with the Russian attempts to intervene in our elections. And if we don't know where the money's coming from, then we don't know whether it's legal either. We had a case just recently that involved some phenomenally serious allegations of Russian money being funneled into the NRA in order to affect our political debate and our political system. And we should have investigated that. I thought it was a phenomenally serious allegation that demanded investigation. Our lawyers did not recommend that we investigate it.
Why?
I think after over a decade of having their recommendations rejected, our lawyers are a little bit gun shy in some of their recommendations these days. And I say that, I love our staff. I think they're dedicated to the mission of the agency, but, it has an impact. If recommendation after recommendation gets shot down, you start to think, well, maybe I should temper my recommendations. And this was an instance where I think they made the wrong call.
Has the last election cycle sort of changed the way internally, at least, you all view what's worth looking into? I mean, it seems like the bar now for what constitutes a serious allegation has changed so much.
Well, I think that in the last decade, we have seen a real strategic change on the part of the Republicans on the commission that it goes back before 2016. And they have made an ideological choice that they just want the agency to be doing less, and that they have raised the bar on what kind of a standard they are willing to adopt in order to start an investigation. And that started in 2008.
How long have you been on the commission?
Oh, a long time. I've been here since the end of 2002.
If since 2008, the Republicans on the commission, or many of the Republicans on the commission, have a different point of view of what they think campaign finance law should be to you, and there's been very little that's gotten done in the way of investigations, and even less is going to get done because now you do not have a quorum again, why do you stay?
I stay because I think the mission of this agency is vital to our democracy, and every day I get to come in here and fight for the right of U.S. citizens to know who's behind the money, who's sending money to our politicians, to whom are they indebted, whose interests are they going to have at heart when they get into office. I think this is really critical, that people need to have this information, and I think it is critical for people who care about these issues to be here fighting for that right of the American people to have that information.